Richard Dawkins, who hates creationists, said, "It is absolutely safe to say that if you meet someone who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid, or insane, or wicked." Well, Richard, I'll send you a copy of this tape, because I'm going to show you 100 reasons why evolution is so stupid. This preacher called all the colleges and universities around Boston and said, "Would you like to have Kent Hovind come speak at your college?" Finally, one professor said, "Yes, he can come speak at our school if our professors can ask him any questions they want, because we want to show our students how dumb these creationists really are." So the preacher called me and said, "Brother Hovind, would you like to speak at this college and let them make fun of you for a couple hours?" I said I would be honored. So I showed up. There were 6 professors and all their students. You know, I felt like Daniel in the lion's den. I got my charts out and I said, "Now folks, I believe the Bible." Nobody cheered. I said, "I believe about 6,000 years ago God made everything. The world's not millions of years old. 4.6 billion years ago, there was a big flood. I'm sorry, 4,400 years ago, there was a big flood, not 4.6. And 2,000 years ago, Jesus came, and I gave them the basic Bible story, okay? Then I told them what they believe. Because most of them don't know what they believe, you have to tell them. You guys believe 20 billion years ago there was a big bang where nothing exploded and produced everything. 4.6 billion years ago the earth cooled down, made a hard rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. And this early life form found somebody to marry. Boy, now that's a good trick. And something to eat, of course, and slowly evolved into everything we see today. One professor was getting kind of upset about this time. I seem to do that to them. He said, "Mr. Hovind, there are hundreds of varieties of dogs in the world." I said, "Yes, sir, you're right about that." He said, "Do you mean to tell me that you believe all these dogs came from 2 dogs off a Noah's Ark? You expect me to believe that? Ha, ha, ha." I said, "Sir, would you look at what you're teaching your students? You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world came from a rock." I had one woman come to me after a debate one time. She was steaming down the aisle. Boy, she was mad. Oh, I could tell I'm in trouble now. I stood there quivering in my boots, you know. She walked up and she said, "Tonight, you said we believe we come from a rock. We do not believe that." I said, "Well, ma'am, calm down just for a minute." I said, "Do you believe in evolution?" She said, "Yes, I do. I'm a professor here at the university." I said, "Well, would you please tell me then where we came from?" She said, "We came from a macromolecule." I said, "Where did that come from?" She said, "From the oceans, from the prebiotic soup." I said, "Where did that come from?" She said, "Well, it rained on the rocks for millions of years." And you could see it was slowly dawning on her. I do believe I come from a rock, don't I? Yes, ma'am, you do. You ought to be proud of it. Hey, don't step on Grandpa, whatever you do. Look, that's stupid, okay? There's no kind way to say it. There's a great book dealing with some of the flaws in the Miller experiment. If you want more on that for your kids to study out there on the table, get the book Icons of Evolution. I was in a debate one time, and we had question and answer time at the end. The student stood up and he said to the evolutionist, he said, "Sir, how did male and female evolve?" The professor got up and he said, "Well, that is a giant mother may I step in the evolution story." A mother may I step? This is science. Wow. Well, so according to them, you know, for the next few billion years or hundreds of millions of years, you know, life learned to produce something other than its own kind. Of course, today everything only produces its own kind, but they say long ago and far away, they were able to do something different. Textbooks will say we started like a bacteria and slowly evolved to a human. I think that's stupid. But if you want to believe that, that's perfectly fine. Those trees of life that they put in the textbooks for your kids are a bunch of nonsense. And even evolutionists will admit that. Stephen Jay Gould, the Marxist professor at Harvard University, he says that evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks are not the evidence of fossils. It's only inference. We infer, we imply, we hope it happened this way. This textbook says, all the many forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor. What? You mean the birds and the bananas have a common ancestor? Isn't that what he says? Found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. Well, in the first place, there's no such thing as a primitive unicellular organism, okay? One single cell is more complex than a space shuttle. There's no such thing as a primitive single-celled organism. We talk about that on video number 4 of our series. But he says, All the forms of life are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. What were those first cells like? How do we know? What events led up to their formation? No traces of those events remain. Did you catch that? Hey kid, we know what happened, but there's no proof. Primitive, huh? This one says the humans, mammals, birds, crocodiles all had a common ancestor. Well, anything inside that circle is religious speculation. It is stupid. Reptiles produce reptiles, dogs produce dogs, people produce people, and there's never been an exception to that. Darwin said, though, if my theory be true, here's his book right here. You can look on page 211. He said, if my theory be true, numberless intermediate varieties must assuredly have existed. Boy, you're right about that, Charlie. I mean, to change from a rock to a dog would take a few changes. David Robb, who believes in evolution very strongly, says, in the years after Darwin, his advocates hoped to find predictable progressions. In general, these have not been found, yet the optimism has died hard, and some pure fantasy has crept into textbooks. Oh, you're kidding. Fantasy in our textbooks? Oh, yep. 5 years old. What's your name? Misty. Here we have a dog, a wolf, a coyote, and a banana. Which one is not like the others? Dog, wolf, coyote, and banana. Banana. All right, let's give Misty a hand. Very good. The other ones. Some of these college professors can't tell. Look, there's a variety of dogs, folks, and they probably had a common ancestor. It was a dog, okay? It's just a dog. See, variations happen within the dog kind. You get a big dog or a little dog, but there are limits to these variations. Haven't the farmers been trying to breed for bigger pigs for a long time? They try to get the biggest pig they can, don't they? Do you think they'll ever get a pig as big as Texas? I bet there's a limit in there somewhere, isn't there? Roaches become resistant to pesticides after a while. Do you think they'll ever become resistant to a sledgehammer? I bet there's a limit. Yeah, okay. They still produce the same kind of plant or animal. That's not evolution. That's just a variation of the same kind, okay? And the information for that variety was already present in the gene pool. No new information is ever added. The dogs or the pigs don't learn to fly or become pink. Okay, there's no new information added, just scrambled information. And the gene pool of the new variety is now more limited than before. Somebody spent years crossbreeding dogs to develop a Chihuahua. All that work to make a dog that is 100% useless. Let's turn all the Chihuahuas in the world loose back into the woods. How long would they last? They'd run up to the wolf. Yep, 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 yep. Crunch. Go ahead, make my day. A useless dog. Genetic information was lost when you got your variation. It wasn't added. You might have selected a certain slice of the gene pool with small dog, quick characteristics, but you didn't add anything. You selected something from the population. So we all drove down to the museum. The guide met us at the door. He said, would you like me to give you a tour? We said, that would be great, sir. The first place we stopped on the tour was the geologic time scale, the big chart. They got it behind glass so the kids can't touch it. This is holy, sacred. And the guide said, now boys and girls, this layer of rock right here is about 70 million years old. My daughter was 12 at the time. She raised her hand. She said, mister, how do you know that layer is 70 million years old? He said, well, honey, we tell the age of the layers by what kind of fossils we find in them. They're called index fossils. Oh, she said, thank you, sir. We walked around the other side of the dinosaur, and we're standing over here, and the guide said, now, folks, these bones you're looking at are about 100 million years old. My daughter raised her hand again. She said, mister, how do you know those bones are 100 million years old? He said, honey, that's a good question. We tell the age of the bones by which layer they come from. She said, excuse me, sir, but when we were standing over there, you told me you knew the age of the layers by the bones, and now you're telling me you know the age of the bones by the layers. She said, isn't that circular reasoning? I thought, wow, a chip off the old block. That guide had the strangest look on his face. It was almost as if he were thinking. He looked at my daughter. He looked at me. I wasn't about to help him. I thought, wow, this is going to be good. I got to hear this. He looked back at my daughter. He said, you know, you're right. That is circular reasoning. I never thought of that before. Folks, geologic column is a joke. It doesn't exist. I'll just give you a couple of quotes here. This guy says, the rocks do date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately. Stratigraphy cannot avoid this kind of reasoning if it insists on using only temporal concepts because circularity is inherent. You have to use circular reasoning to get it right. Well, that's stupid. And you don't need to be too bright to figure out that's stupid, okay? This geologic column contains limestone scattered all throughout the geologic column. I like to ask him the question, I say, fellows, you have limestone scattered all through this column. How do you know the age? It's all limestone. I mean, if I handed you a piece of limestone, how would you know if it's 100 million year old Jurassic limestone or 600 million year old Cambrian limestone? I mean, how would you tell the difference? There's only one way they can tell, by the index fossils. That's how it's done, folks. That is stupid. Because those fossils don't count for anything, as we'll see in a minute. They tell the kids each of these layers is a different age. 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, real impressive, huge numbers. Now, Charlie Darwin did not like round numbers. He wanted to be more precise. He said the Wealdian deposits are 306,662,400 years old. Now, okay, Charlie, I think that's stupid. Those layers are not different ages, folks. All over the world we find petrified trees standing up, running through multiple rock layers. Now, if you get a petrified tree standing up, running through different rock layers, I don't think it's smart to say those layers are vastly different ages. Petrified trees in the vertical position. They find them all over the world. Okay, here's one from Alabama. Come out of a seam of coal, through 20 feet of rock, into another seam of coal. They found about 3 dozen of them, I think, in that one little coal mine, one little area, while they're digging the coal out. Petrified trees standing up. Cookeville, Tennessee. They found a bunch of them. This one's 30 feet tall, standing up. Joggins, Nova Scotia is famous for their petrified trees standing up in the vertical position. All over the area there, folks. Those trees did not get slowly covered by the sediments over millions of years. They would rot and fall down. Sometimes the petrified trees are upside down, running through many rock layers. Scientists estimate at the bottom of Spirit Lake in Mount St. Helens there are now 20,000 trees that were blown out by the volcano. Thousands of them are standing up in the bottom of the lake, already buried 15 feet deep in mud. None of them grew there. Those trees are going to petrify. It only takes a few years to petrify a piece of wood. In the laboratory, it can be done in 24 hours. They'll say, boys and girls, you have 2 bones in your wrist, radius and ulna. And boys and girls, look at the whale's flipper carefully. Did you know the whale has 2 bones in his flipper? And they're called the radius and the ulna? Same as ours. Wow. Who named them, teacher? The whale? Think about it. Luther Sunderland asked all the major evolutionists, he said, where is the evidence for evolution? They all said, well, somebody else has it. We don't have it over here. So he wrote a letter to Colin Patterson. He's the director of the British Museum of Natural History. They've got the largest fossil collection in the world. He said, Mr. Patterson, I read your book on evolution. I noticed you didn't show us the missing links. Why didn't you show us the missing links? Patterson wrote back and said, I fully agree with your comments on the lack of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. I will lay it on the line, there is not one such fossil. There are no missing links, folks. The whole chain is missing. Even Stephen Gould admitted the absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages is a persistent and nagging problem for evolution. We got the theory, we know it's true, now we just need the evidence. That's the way they think about it. Richard Goldschmidt said, maybe the first bird hatched from a reptile egg. Oh, Richard, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that's stupid. See, what's happened, these guys have looked for missing links in the fossil record. They can't find any, and so they say, well, maybe evolution happened so fast it wasn't preserved. Maybe a reptile laid an egg and a bird hatched out. Well, who did that bird marry? There's only about a zillion differences between a reptile and a bird. We'll get into that later sometime if we get time. But if they want to believe that, that's perfectly fine.
Because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness.